If you're planning a get-together or having friends over, this is the perfect bite-sized appetizer to take your party to the next level. Guaranteed it will be a conversation starter. I am super excited to share this creation with you. It's a small chop recipe that's a fusion between a classic Nigerian appetizer known as Gizdodo and a French puff pastry known as vol au vent or pastry puff cases. If this is your first time on this channel, I would like to welcome you. My goal is to share easy, delicious recipes that you can recreate at home for your friends and family. As always, ensure you hit the subscribe button so you get notified whenever I have a new recipe to share with you. Alright, so let's get to it. Alright, let's talk through what you'll need for this recipe. You'll need some puff pastry. I'll walk you through my favorite puff pastry recipe. Next, you'll need some ripe plantains. Then you'll need some gizzard, onions, garlic, ginger, scotch bonnet peppers, yellow bell peppers, and seasoning. As usual, all ingredients and tools used for this recipe will be in the description box below, so make sure you jump on right there to get all the details that you need. Okay, so let's get started. So we'll start off by adding the salt to the flour, and then you want to mix that in properly to ensure that the salt is very well distributed within the flour. You don't want to have any pockets of salt within your dough. So you want to mix that in thoroughly. Then you want to add the cold butter to the flour salt mixture. So you want to ensure that you're bringing the butter right out of the fridge. And then you want to coat the butter with the flour and then start squishing the cubes of butter within your fingers. So what you're looking for really is dime-sized chunks of butter, right? And then the flour should kind of look like coarse sand. So you don't want the butter to be too small, right? Because you want it large enough to be able to laminate the dough once you start rolling it out. So what you're going to try to do is massage the butter into the flour, but keep in mind that you want the butter to continue to be cold. So if you find that your fingers or your hands are too warm and the butter is beginning to melt, make sure you put it back in the fridge until it cools down. So keep working the butter into the flour, keep squishing it in until you get good dime-sized pieces of butter in your dough. So once you're done squishing the butter into the flour mixture, the next step is to add ice cold water to the flour butter mixture. So here you see I have some ice. Your goal is to keep everything as cold as possible. So you want to add the water to the flour butter mixture, and then get in there with your hands and start to toss the water with the flour. So what you want to ensure is that the water is very well distributed within the flour mixture. So you don't want pockets of moisture in some places and then pockets of dry flour in other places. You want to mix it thoroughly to ensure that the water gets in, and you'll see it'll look kind of shaggy. That's fine. That's the texture we're looking for. It's not going to look like well-formed dough immediately, but this is the step that you need to go through to get the perfect puff pastry. Next, you want to cover up the dough and place it in the fridge for about 10 to 15 minutes to rest. So once the dough has rested for 10 to 15 minutes in the fridge, you want to bring it out and then pour it onto your countertop so it can be rolled into shape. So here you'll see it still looks a little shaggy. That's fine. That's the way it'll look until you've rolled it to shape. So pour all of that out of the bowl. Next, you just want to kind of bring it all together as best as you can. and then roll. So you can still see the big chunks of butter. So the butter is going to get laminated into this dough as you roll the dough, as you roll it. So here I'm trying to roll it into a long rectangular shape. And then I'm folding that back. So right now it looks really scrappy, but as you work with it, the dough will come together and will look perfect. So here I'm going to try to roll it again into another rectangle, and then I'll fold it over. So this whole process is really roll, fold, then turn, and then roll again. So you keep doing this until the dough forms. So here I'm scraping off some of the butter that has stuck to my rolling pin. Here again, I'm going to fold. And this is why it's handy to have a bench scraper, because it just makes it easier to fold the dough. As I said before, all tools used in this video are listed in the description box below, and if you need to get one of these tools, there are handy links as well that will direct you to where you can buy these tools. Right, so you just keep rolling, folding, and then roll and fold until your dough comes together. If while you are rolling it you find that your dough is getting soft, or it's really warm in the room and so the dough is softening, fold it up and then put it like on a parchment lined baking sheet and put it back in the fridge for about 10 to 15 minutes before you start working on it again. So here I'll just continue folding and rolling until the dough starts to come together. So one of the mistakes that people make when they start working with the puff pastry dough is that they think it's too dry and they feel like they need to add a little water to it. Guys, I need you to trust the process. Do not add any water to this dough. Adding water to it will just toughen the dough and make it difficult to work with, and it'll just not puff up as nicely. So trust the process and just keep rolling it, folding it until the flour and the butter come together. Also, you do not want to overwork this dough. So as soon as you see that it's coming together and you don't have any more dry flour separate from the dough, like it's all homogeneous, then it's good to go. It's good to go. As you can see, it's looking good. It's no longer crumbly. If you look closely enough, you can also see like streaks of butter in the dough. So that's exactly what you want. You want the butter to be laminated within the dough. This is what is going to give you amazing puffiness when you finally use this dough to make your pastry, when you finally bake it. So here, this is, I believe, my last turn before I finally place this in the fridge to rest. So wrap your dough with plastic wrap and place it in the fridge for about 20 to 30 minutes before you use it. You can also freeze it or refrigerate it until you're ready to use it for whatever you need it for. So for example, I use this batch to make this beef pot pie. I also use it to make the snack bites here, and of course the Gizdodo vol au vent. So it's time to start working on the Gizdodo filling. So first you want to rinse your plantains. Make sure they're nice and ripe. You do not want unripe plantains for this, because the sweetness of the plantains enhances the flavor of the gizdodo. So peel your plantains, and then you want to take off any bad pieces if there's any bad piece. So next you want to cut this into small cubes. So first I cut down lengthwise, and then one more time, and then I dice the plantain into small little pieces like so. So be careful not to cut your finger. You gotta be careful with your knife. So just keep cutting the plantain until you get to the end, and then place it in a bowl. So you want to do the same for the second plantain. So for this recipe I'm going to be using 2 plantains, but you can always scale up the recipe if you need to. So here again, you cut off the tails or the bottom and the top of the plantain, you peel, and then you start to dice the plantain. So a little bit about plantain. So plantain can be enjoyed in several ways. It can be fried, boiled, grilled, and sometimes even dried and then ground into flour to make other meals. Plantain is also a staple food in West African countries, in the Caribbean, Central America, and coastal parts of Social America. So you can see it's a very well loved and versatile food. So here I just chop it up again just like the first one, and then place it in the bowl. And here's a quick fun fact for you if you didn't know: plantain is actually a fruit. So sometimes because we cook it and we boil it, we tend to think it's maybe a vegetable, but it's actually a fruit. So next I'm going to season very lightly with some chicken seasoning. You can use a little bit of salt, or you can leave out the seasoning completely. The plantain is going to be sweet on its own because it's ripe. I'm just adding a little more seasoning because I like it that way. Next you just want to toss that using your spatula or a slotted spoon. And then you want to add about half a teaspoon of oil. So I typically use avocado oil because it has a high smoking point, and I'm going to be air frying these plantains because it's just a healthier alternative for me. So you can use any other high smoking point oil if you like. Use whatever works for you. For me, it's avocado oil. So next I'm going to pour my diced plantains into my preheated air fryer. So I'll probably air fry it for about 10 minutes or until it's nice and brown and well cooked. So while the plantain is air frying, next I'll start working on my gizzard. So make sure you rinse your gizzard thoroughly and then clean it if necessary. So take a good look at your gizzard and make sure that if there's any skin or dirt inside the gizzard, that you take it out and you clean it thoroughly. So you see I'm dicing the gizzard into small bite-sized pieces. It just makes it easier for whoever is eating this to actually enjoy little pieces of the gizzard instead of having like a whole piece in their mouth. So cut into small bite-sized pieces until you've cut it all. Alright, here we go. So this is one piece of gizzard that needs to be cleaned out. You can see it still has the dirty part in it. So just peel it off, remove all of that additional skin inside of the gizzard, and then dice your gizzard into small little bite-sized pieces. So I'll be giving you the weight of the amount of gizzards I used for this recipe, but typically all I do is just eyeball it and make sure I have as much gizzard as I have plantain. So you know, just eyeball equal quantity gizzard with plantain and you're good to go. But again, as I said, check in the description box below for the weights of the gizzards that I used for this recipe. So next you want to chop up the onions that you'll be using to boil the gizzards. So just cut your red onion in half, take off the head and the bottom of the onions, peel off the skin, and then peel off the skin here, and then chop your onions into pieces. So this will just add flavor to the gizzard when you start to boil it, so it's not bland. So you want to add as much flavor to your gizzard while you boil it. So cut into thin slices. And then I set aside. And then same with your garlic. So just press on the garlic firmly to loosen the skin, and then you can peel off the skin of the garlic easily, like so. So you want to do the second one as well. And again, use the garlic based on how much garlic you like. Like I like 2 cloves of garlic in this gizzard. You may like more, you may like less. It's up to you. So cut off the bottom of the garlic and then chop into small, tiny pieces. Garlic is a great way to add flavor to meals and also has amazing health benefits. If you cannot find fresh garlic, also feel free to use powdered garlic. So next I'll get some fresh ginger and just cut off about a thumb-sized piece of ginger. Again, use as little or as much as you want. It depends on your taste and how much you enjoy the ginger flavor. So here, just peel the skin off of the ginger. Then dice the ginger into small pieces. So first I'm going to slice it, and then I'll take part of the ginger and cut them into tiny little bits. So the tiny little bits of ginger that I'm cutting into this will stay in with the gizzard and the onions once I'm done boiling. But then the bigger pieces I'm going to take out. So that's just the way I cook it. I'll take out some of the big pieces and then leave the little pieces to enjoy as part of the food. So next, place the gizzard, the onions, the garlic, the ginger into your pot. So all of that into the pot, and then we'll start to season. So here I'm going to start off adding my curry. Next I'll add my thyme, then my chicken seasoning. You can also use bouillon cubes if you prefer. And I'll add some salt, and then add some water to it. Then I'll place this on medium heat, cover the pot and let it cook until really soft. So next we'll start working on the Gizdodo sauce. So here I'm cutting up my onions as usual, cut off the head and the tail and clean the side of the onions and then chop. So real fun fact about onions. So did you know that in the Middle Ages, onions were an acceptable form of currency and could actually be used to pay for rent, goods, services, and was sometimes given as gifts. I dare you to try to pay your mortgage or your rent with onions today. Good luck to you. So anyways, back to the onions. So here I want to cut them into, you want to slice them thinly. Now it's also time to prepare our bell peppers. So you want to cut that into half. So you want to open that up, take out the seeds, and then dice the peppers. Now because we're using these peppers as part of an appetizer, we want to make sure everything is small and in bite-sized pieces. Next we're going to chop up some scotch bonnet peppers. Again, add as much to your taste, based on your taste. So now it's time to prepare the sauce. Add about 1 tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of oil to your frying pan. I use avocado oil. You can also use olive oil, vegetable oil, or any other oil that you would typically use. Heat up the oil on medium heat. Once it's hot enough, add your thyme and your curry to the hot oil. You don't want the oil to be steaming hot. You just want it warm enough where it'll start to fry the seasonings. So typically I do this because I find that frying the seasoning kind of enhances the flavors of the herbs in your sauce. So I'll leave this to fry for about 15 seconds, 20 seconds before I add anything else to it. So now it's time to add the onions, the garlic, and you want to stir that into the oil and let it cook for about a minute or two. Then you add your bell peppers and your Scotch bonnet pepper to the frying pan. Stir as well to make so it's very well coated in the oil. And then you want to leave that to fry until the onions are translucent and the peppers are a little softer. Also add your thyme, your salt, your chicken seasoning, and then stir again so that everything is well combined. So this is all on medium heat. Now once it's fried and the onions are translucent, add your crushed tomatoes and then stir that in until everything is very well incorporated, like everything is well mixed in together. So you see that looks beautiful, like the pop of yellow in the red just makes it look beautiful, and it'll make your Gizdodo look even more presentable. Next you want to add a little more seasoning, and this is based on taste, you don't have to add it. I'm adding a splash of Worcestershire sauce to it, and then I'll cook this on medium heat for a few minutes, about 10-15 minutes, until the sauce is reduced and you can see it's well fried. So you can see the oil at the top, so it shows that it's well fried. Now we'll go back to the plantains. You see the plantains are done, so bring them out of your air fryer, pour them into a bowl, and then set them aside. Next you want to check on your gizzard. So it should be very nice and soft. You don't want it to be too chewy, so you can check on it by pricking it with a fork. Once it's soft enough, take it off the heat and then also put it in your air fryer for about 10-15 minutes. So all you want to do is just dry it out a bit, and then this also enhances the flavor of the gizzard. So in typical Gizdodo, you'll be frying the gizzard and frying the plantain just to add flavor to it. But in this case, I'm just grilling it as a healthier alternative. So place all of that in the air fryer and then let it air fry for about 9-10 minutes. So check on your gizzard, and you see here it's nice and dry. All you want to do is just move it around with your spatula to just check on it. So this looks ready to go. So we'll also bring this out of the air fryer and then set it aside. Now it's time to pour in your gizzard into the sauce. So pour all of that into the sauce and then add the air fried plantains as well. Right, now you want to mix all of that together until the plantain and the gizzards are coated in the sauce. So it looks a little dry right now, but that's fine. All you want to do is coat this in the sauce. So you turn down the heat to medium, actually low heat, and then you just let this cook slowly so that all the flavors can meld together. So you leave this on low heat and let it cook for about 10 minutes. So next you want to bring out the puff pastry from the fridge and then let it rest for about 10 minutes before you start to roll it. So here I'm taking out the piece that I need and I'm rolling it about 1/4 to 1/3 inch thick, and then I'm going to cut it out into 2x2 sized squares. So here I'm using a ribbon cutter because that's what I have, but you can also use a knife. You can measure with a ruler and then cut out the squares that you need. So what we're trying to do is create puff pastry cases, like little, appetizer sized cases where we can put the Gizdodo. So we're going to cut out squares to use as the base, and then we'll cut circles out of the squares that I'll be using for the tops. So cut out all the circles, and we'll use the circles in another appetizer recipe that I'll be sharing later. So create as many of these as you need. Next, you want to brush the base with some milk or egg wash, or you can actually use some water. So brush that on lightly, you don't want too much of it on. And then place the tops over. So that's how you're going to make the vol-au-vent cases. So do that again for as many of these appetizer bites as you need. And then as soon as you're done, place this in the fridge and let them chill for at least 15 minutes. Next, you want to brush each one of them lightly with some egg wash before baking. Bake at 425 degrees Fahrenheit for about 10 to 12 minutes until it's puffed up, and then bring it out and they are ready to use. Don't these just look delightful? Now you can put a bit of Gizdodo in each of these puff pastry cases. If you find that the cases are too puffed up, you can create little holes in the middle, so it'll take a little more Gizdodo. But really, honestly, for bite-sized appetizers, these are just perfect. So it's just got a little bit of sweetness from the plantains, spiciness from the peppers, and just buttery flakiness from the puff pastry. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe. If you did, again, I would encourage you to like, to subscribe, and definitely share this with your friends. Make this. If you have any questions, feel free to leave questions for me in the comments section below. Let me know what you think about this recipe. You take care, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.